All right, what's up guys? This is David here with Team Troponin. We are about just under 7 weeks out from Nationals now. So we're gonna do a little chest and shoulder session today. It's gonna be kind of similar to the one that we did with Danny a few weeks ago, but a couple different exercises, a little bit different order, but pretty much the same format. We'll do 3 pressing movements, a fly, and then move on to some stuff for rear and side delts. So first up today is this Nautilus machine press. I think last time with Danny we started with the banded dumbbell press. This serves kind of a similar purpose. The banded dumbbell press, you know, I talk about strength curves a lot. It's a little bit tougher in the shortened range with the band tension, and this machine is kind of the same way. It's got a strength curve or resistance profile that's a little bit more top heavy. I usually like to start with a movement like that, you know, gets things nice and warm, gets things activated before moving on to something like a free weight dumbbell press or a Smith machine press that's gonna put a lot of tension in the bottom range. So it just kind of keeps the shoulders healthy, keeps the pecs healthy, and I just kind of like how it makes everything feel. Like any machine, you'll want to make sure that you set this up right for your body. This Nautilus piece doesn't have a ton of different adjustments points, but you do want to make sure you have the seat set at a good height. And the seat height shouldn't just be based on how tall you are. You know, I'm not super short or tall, I'm 5'9", but I do have really long legs and a short torso. So in order for me to basically line my pecs up with the line of resistance here with the handles, I need the seat to actually be up pretty high, which means my feet actually don't quite make full contact with the floor. It's almost like a little booster seat setting. Whereas, you know, if you were somebody with a different build and a much longer torso, you'd have to have your butt down closer to the floor, the seat lower, to line your pecs up with the line of resistance. Another point of adjustment on this in a lot of chest presses is how far forward you have the back pad set. A lot of people would assume that you want it set as far forward as possible so you can get this super deep stretch on your pecs. And if you have great shoulder mobility, maybe that's the case for you. You know, like a lot of bigger guys, my shoulder mobility it's just okay. It's not horrible, but it's not great either. And so if I try to get this extremely deep stretch, I'm really just gonna end up internally rotating and letting my shoulders pitch forward. Another thing to consider is your limb length. So I have very long arms. So, you know, if I get about this far back, you might say there's still a lot of distance here between my hand and my chest, and like I should be able to get a bigger stretch. But you take somebody with really short arms, that same range of motion is gonna put them to where their hand really is in line with their pec. So that's why it's tough to compare the way you perform an exercise with the way that someone else performs it if they're built completely differently from you. So part of it's just going by feel, and this is a good reason to video your training too, because you might think that you're getting an appropriately deep full stretch when really you're just letting your shoulders pitch forward. You're not getting any more tension on the pec by going deeper. So for me, I have this set at kind of a medium setting. I think it's 3 out of 6. So probably every exercise I do after this, I'll do just enough warm up to feel the exercise out and gauge what weight I should use. But like I've been doing a lot lately on the first movement, I do a little bit more warm up, more feeder sets. You know, probably to the point where I'm slightly fatigued by the time I get into that top set, but the feel is much greater. Mind muscle connection's better when I do that. So here I'm gonna do a little bit of a 3x8 pyramid. So first set was at 200, that was pretty easy. I'll do a set with a stack at 245. That'll be fairly easy as well. And then Nick Bagley let me borrow his gym pin here, so I'll throw that on for the final set and probably do a big drop set or rest pause. We'll see how it feels. That set with the stack at 8 was pretty easy. So again, I've got the gym pin. I've lashed on a 45 here. I think I'm gonna do probably a big double drop set, and that'll call it good for this exercise. Hopefully this goes okay. This machine has a tendency to kind of like eat up the pin. Once you do a set, the pin's really hard to pull out. So hopefully I don't have to struggle too hard to switch the pin between drops. Ooh. 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 Pretty happy with that set. I think the last time I did this, the same thing, a big double drop, I got 8 with the plate on the stack before dropping. I got about 9 this time, so I'll call that a little bit of progression. And you know, at this point in prep, I certainly am not to the point where I'm super tired and I will have dropped strength, but I'm happy to keep progressing. And hopefully I can keep that rolling until at least 2 to 3 weeks out, and then just hold from there. Okay, so now we're on to probably my favorite chest exercise. It's the low incline dumbbell press. I think it's a fine movement to start with, especially if you're more like a beginner or intermediate and you have no shoulder problems, no pec problems, anything like that. But just for safety's sake, like I said, I like to start with something like a machine press, especially if it's a little bit heavier in the end range, before moving on to a basic free weight exercise like this. Or like you saw the last time Danny and I trained chest and shoulders, we started with this, but we started with it banded. So we'll see how strong I feel. My guess is I'll probably end up at about the same weight I use when we did these banded, but without the band. But since it's the second movement, I'll be okay with that. It's great to gauge your strength, and you should, but always keep in mind the context. If you're doing a movement second or third, you're never going to be quite as strong as when you do it first. I'm at 10,000 steps a day right now, and usually I can nab like 3, 4, maybe even 5,000 in the gym between sets without really trying. So a lot of the time I would just go straight from the first warm-up of this movement straight into the work set or the top set. I'm playing it a little bit more careful today, just doing an extra feeder set. Not because anything hurts or because I don't feel strong. I actually feel pretty strong, but if you get your kick up wrong, it can really screw up the entire set. So I just kind of want to get one more practice rep in with a good kick up, and then I'll move on probably to the 150s. Like I said, I am feeling pretty strong. I'm somewhat tempted to go up to the 160s, but it's probably not going to be as productive of a set as if I just control these well. I often end up doing a top set and a back off set on a dumbbell press, but I always feel like the back off set with greater control is the one that's really more productive. So, I figure why do 2 sets and make one of them really good when I can do one, make it really good, and then maybe gauge from there whether I need another one or not. I'm pretty happy with that set. I think my PR with the 150s, even as a second movement, is 10, but I haven't done it with that control. So that control for 8, I'm not going to say I'm stronger than when I've done 10, but at least as strong and probably a good stimulus. So I think I'll rest a couple minutes, do a quick back off set of around 10 and 12 reps, and then move on. So it was a top set and a back off on the dumbbell press, and to be honest, between those and the machine press we started with, my pecs are already pretty smoked. I think a lot of people like training chest. A lot of guys like training chest because, it's a show muscle. You can feel it, you can see it in the mirror. But if anything needs probably less volume and less frequency than most guys are giving it, it's chest. I think most people can build a really good chest with a relatively low volume and frequency of work. And the rest of that work could be better allocated to more shoulders, more back. So given that my pecs are pretty toast already, we're still going to do a fly at the end. For the third pressing movement, it's going to be this high incline you see here, which is, it's at least as much front delt as it is upper pec, which is good. For me, it's good at least. I don't have a dedicated shoulder day right now, and I don't have a day where an overhead press is the main movement, but keeping these or even a little bit lower incline barbell press in or Smith press has served the exact same purpose. So throughout this prep and probably into the off season, I'm not planning on doing a whole lot of completely overhead pressing anymore. So I just did that last rep at 3 plates just to kind of feel it out. I was thinking this would be my top weight for my final set, and I think it will be. When I do these second in the movement, second in the workout, earlier in the workout, I typically do a top set and a back off set. And if I'm gonna go really heavy on any pressing movement, like in the 5, 6, 7 rep range, it'll be this. But since it's a little bit later in the workout today, I'm gonna use an intensity technique. So this one's the Chris Pause set, named after Chris Edmonds, who I've mentioned a couple times before. It's basically your typical 3-round rest pause set. We're gonna go to failure 3 times with about 20 to 30 seconds rest in between each round. But instead of just stopping there, there's gonna be a 4th and final round where we drop the weight around 30 to 40%. I'll probably just peel a plate off and then go to failure 1 more time. And then depending on where the where I fail or where that final rep ends, I might do some partials in the bottom and then kind of hold it for an ISO hold before stopping the set. That Chris Pause set on the Smith press went about as well as I could have expected. That's right about where my strength has been the last couple months. To get 8 with 3 plates as the third movement, I'm pretty happy with that. And I felt like the control was pretty good. Mind-muscle connection was really good. So now we're moving on to pec deck. That'll be the final chest exercise. All in all, that probably doesn't seem like a ton of work. It was, a couple of feeders and 1 really big failure set on the machine press, top and a back off on dumbbell press, and now that big intensifier on the Smith press. But to be honest, for pecs, I don't think they can really take that much more if you're really hitting failure in your sets. It's not a huge muscle, relatively speaking, relative to the rest of your body. A bigger muscle like quads and certainly back can take a lot more volume, more exercises, more failure sets in one workout and really see benefit from it. But for chest, if you can hit 3 pressing movements and feel like you've got plenty more left in you, then I have to question what you really did on those first 3 movements. So we'll hit pec deck here, and then I always like using the pec deck as my fly movement on chest day, honestly, because in addition to it feeling really good, I just turn around and hit the reverse pec deck for the main rear delt movement of the day. So it makes the whole workout run a little bit more smoothly. So one tip to get more out of this or any fly movement is don't throw the weight. And it's extremely easy to do that. It's kind of like getting a spot on a bench. A 2-finger spot gives you a lot of help. And in the same way on a pec deck, a little bit of body English gives you a lot of help. Towards the end of a failure set, that's perfectly fine. But when you're really trying to tax the muscle, you want to think about squeezing. So don't throw it even a little bit. Think about bringing your elbows, not your hands, but your elbows forward and together. It doesn't have to be that slow, but it's about pec contraction, not just moving the weight A to B. The prime free weight pieces or the plate loaded pieces have different pegs for adjusting the resistance profile, and all those selectorized pieces have this adjustment up top where you can do the same thing, adjust the resistance profile with their numbers 1 through 5. So at the moment it's set on their number 1, which is just the basic or mid-range setting. So we're going to start there, and then as the set progresses, I'll drop to a more lengthened setting. Because again, typically you fatigue more in the shortened range first. So we'll still drop weight from one round to the next, but we won't have to drop it as much as if you kept the resistance profile the same. So all in all, it'll be a little bit more tension on the pecs from start to finish than if you just kept the setting at number 1. So I'll move from number 1 to, I think it's number 5, the mid-lengthened setting for the first drop, and then finally to 3, the most lengthened setting for the second drop. It was a pretty good final set for pecs. I think I got 10, 5, 5 on my double drop, so total of 20 reps. Good pump on that movement. Just as pumped. I feel like I got about everything I could out of it. So now we're on to shoulders. And again, I like doing the pec deck just because I can turn right around and start with rear delts for the reverse pec deck, which is by far my favorite rear delt movement. Set the resistance profile back to 1. I never really mess with that much on rear delt training. I'm going to try to incorporate a cue that Danny was giving me the last time we trained chest and shoulders. I think a lot of people position themselves too low when they're training rear delts, like a rear delt fly, thinking that their hands need to be way above the line of their shoulder, like almost at their eyes. What you really want is for your elbows to be high enough, but the seat doesn't have to be so low. So I actually have the seat set at the highest setting, and I'm going to kind of hike myself up in the seat to where my head's actually in this little crook of the machine. But even though my torso's elevated more than a lot of people might, you're gonna notice I'm gonna try to keep my elbows really high. So the first time Danny gave me this cue, I had to cut the weight by like 30–40%. Because you're doing a much better job at that point of isolating rear delts. You're not getting as much trap and even tricep. I think a lot of people end up doing a little bit of an isometric, or like a 1-inch tricep contraction on the rear delt movement. So, you actually want to get a pump in your rear delts when you're training rear delts, which not a lot of people do. So the first time you do it right, it's a pretty unique feeling. If you end a rear delt movement with a tricep pump, you're probably bringing too many other muscles into play. So I just use that first set to feel out the weight. Again, it's not something you can go super heavy on, but I did increase the weight a little bit. And I'm going to superset the rear delt fly with this rinky-dink band to do a pull apart. So this is a really tiny band, but I'm gonna double it over, grab each end, and then right as I hop off the pec deck, I'm gonna do band pull aparts. A set of 10, super explosive. I don't have a really complicated reason for doing this other than it adds a little bit more tension to the rear delts and makes the pump even better. I've really taken a cue from, Danny, from John Meadows' old materials, and now from the stuff that Chris Edmonds puts out about delt training, and that is, if you want your delts to really blow up, you need to train them for the pump. A lot of progressive overload zealots will say, no, train it like every other muscle, just do sets of 8 to 12, progressively overload. But I've never really seen that build big delts on anyone, myself included. Mine didn't really start to grow until I upped the rep range, stopped worrying about weight so much, and just went for a huge delt pump every time I trained them. So there's round 1, pretty simple. Again, we're just going for a huge pump here, so each round I want about 20 to 30 reps on the reverse pec deck, and then about 10 pull aparts. I'm gonna rest at most a minute, then get back into it, 3 total rounds. All right, so that's it for rear delts. And I think a lot of people try to blow up their rear delts with a ton of volume. That's not necessarily a bad idea, because if you need a lot more rear delt, they can take a lot of volume. It'll probably work, provided your recovery is good. But I've found that a little bit of focused work goes a long way, which is why I do them before any other delt work today, and then I'll do a little bit more rear delt work later in the week. So now we're moving on to side delts. We're gonna do this, this prime machine here, partly because it's just available today, but also because I really like it. I don't really mess around with the strength curves on this much the way I did with the prime pec deck. Pretty simple here. We're just going to do sets of around 8 to 10, which might seem like a little bit low rep range for side delts, but they're going to be really controlled reps with a little bit of a pause at the top. And then I'm going to superset that with an over and back with the band. And over and backs are just what they sound like. Take the band, hold it in front of you, around your head to the back, and then back front. Now, if you do that really ballistically, you won't feel much of anything, but if you try to control the movement, it's a ton more tension in the side delt. So again, just going for a huge pump in both the rear and side delts. A bonus of the over and backs, they tend to be pretty good for shoulder health, assuming you're doing them properly. I know my shoulders always feel a little bit better when I incorporate these, so it's kind of two birds with one stone. Get a good side delt stimulus, get a little bit of shoulder prehab. So, as with the reverse pec deck superset, we're just gonna do 3 rounds of this one. At most 60 to 90 seconds rest in between, just enough to collect yourself, but weight will have to come down set to set. That's all right. Just make sure you get all the reps, make them all controlled, get a big pump. So one important thing to note here, if you're gonna use a machine for side raises and you have a good one, you can't just let the machine do the work for you in terms of good technique. With a dumbbell raise, a lot of people tend to use their traps. They use their traps too much and lose some of the side delt tension. And the cue, a really good cue to avoid that, is instead of thinking about raising, think about pushing out. Think about reaching out with your elbows to the walls on either side of you. That's the same kind of cue that you need to apply even when you're on a machine. If you don't have that intent, even with the machine moving in a controlled arc, you can still end up with too much tension in your traps and not enough in your side delts. And so if you think you're super strong on the machine, you might want to incorporate that cue and be really strict about it and see how much weight you can still move. Chances are it'll cut the weight substantially, but you'll get a lot more out of it. So that band over and back might have seemed kind of like a stupid piddly movement. And if you've never tried it, I can see why you would think that. But if you saw at the end how much I was struggling just to get a band overhead, you'll see how much side delt tension that you can really get out of it. So if you've never tried it before, I recommend next time you're doing any kind of side raise, the machine, cable, dumbbell, whatever, try supersetting it with that movement. So the final movement of the workout is going to be a side delt swing. If you followed John Meadows for any length of time, I'm sure you saw him doing these, and he really popularized it, so you can see a lot of other people doing these too. I know Dusty Hanshaw has really made them popular as well, but it's just like what it sounds like. If this is a raise, this is a swing. And if you've never tried this or never seen anybody do it, it might look like another kind of weird piddly exercise, or like I'm just ego lifting because the dumbbell's only moving 6-8 inches, but it's extremely effective for the side delts, especially when you've already exhausted your delts through a fuller range of motion. So I've been finishing basically every delt session with either these for side delts or the same thing for rear delts, where you kind of just lay face forward on a bench, and instead of raising all the way up, you just do a swing. This is also a really good movement to do for very, very high reps. I'd almost say it's pointless for reps anything less than 20, really, because even if you load up with a heavy dumbbell that you can only move this much, you can move it many, many, many times. The delts are pretty fatigue resistant, but it's a great technique to grow your side delts. So just going to grab a heavy pair of dumbbells and do probably 2 rounds of 30 here. That is a very simple movement. It's kind of hard to mess up, but you do want to apply the same cue that we were talking about with side delt raises earlier, which is don't think so much about raising the weight up as you are about pushing your hands and elbows out to your sides. Obviously the weight's too heavy, so you won't be able to get them all the way out here, but you want to think about keeping the weight away from you. You might also want to try turning your hands inward a little bit. Generally the muscle that's facing up with a free weight movement is the one that's actually acting against gravity. So if you keep your hands too much out to the side or even rotated outwards, you're going to get more front delt, which isn't bad, but it's not what we're trying to target. You turn your hands inward just a little bit, it actually puts your side delt up against gravity a little bit more. All right, guys, again, thanks for watching. This was chest and shoulders about 7 weeks out from Nationals. So for a quick recap, we did machine press, low incline dumbbell press, high incline Smith press, pec deck, that was it for chest. For shoulders, we did reverse pec deck, superset with band pull-aparts, the prime raise, superset with band over and backs, and then finally the side delt swings. So pretty short and sweet, but I think that's usually how a chest and shoulder session should go. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell if you like the video. Let us know below what other content you want to see from us at Team Troponin in the future, and we'll see you guys next time.